I have had several people over the last 24 hours who've been, especially after I got home yesterday, I've been reading some of the chatter on Facebook, very annoyed at Pope Francis because they feel that he should, in fact, the headline, a headline on the op-ed pages at the Wall Street Journal this morning says that Pope Francis has belly flopped into the U.S. presidential race. The visual of that I'm not sure about, but I've been getting a lot of questions about that, and I have some thoughts on that in just a moment. I think this is all more of a media creation than it actually is a scandal or a spat or anything else that you happen to call it. We'll get to that in just a moment, but a couple of other points I wanted to make about the program today. I'm going to share with you in a few minutes as well a little audio that one of my coworkers got chatting with a fellow by the name of Paul Brown from the TV program Auction Kings. Mr. Brown is going to be at the Home and Garden Show with us this weekend. He's one of our guests. And I'm going to share an interview that Jackie from next door, literally in the room next door, Brad and Jackie. I know that some of you do cheat and you listen a little bit to country music now and then, and you may actually flip back and forth. And the thing is that if you're a listener of talk radio, you're likely, especially conservative talk radio, your favorite music is likely country. So you're familiar with them. Jackie did a wonderful interview with Paul Brown a few days ago, and I actually have a copy of that I'm going to share with you a little later in the show here today. Also, I had offered State Representative Rich Wills some time just after 9 o'clock news this morning to respond to his primary opponent. Christy Zitto was on the show with us the other day from Glens Ferry, and she's looking to replace him as a representative in one of the two legislative seats that we have that stretches from Mountain Home to Twin Falls. And we were going to. She's challenging him actually, and they go to church together. She feels that it's time for a change in her district. It's not a personal thing, as she was telling us, but I sent him a message. I dropped him a line immediately afterward and said, look, I want to offer you equal time. And he wrote me back and said, yes, give me a telephone call. I'd be very interested. I called him back and left him a message and just said, look, how about Friday morning? Let me know. I say let me know because, and I just want to issue this to people out there. A lot of times I have people who come and they approach me and they say, I'd like to be on the show, but I've already offered a time slot to someone else. And it isn't, I don't normally do it, right? Rarely have a guest off the top of the show, for instance, because, well, we set things up. We set the table in the first 15 minutes of the program. So I tend to push guests back a little bit. In fact, I'd prefer them in the last hour of the program if we could do that, out of drive time, and that way we have a little bit more time to actually talk with them. In drive time, it's all consultant-driven, move fast, get out of things, move along. But I'll offer people time slots, and they'll figure, well, the offer means I've got that time slot. But then someone else will come along while I'm waiting for a confirmation and say, I'd like to be on the show. And I've had this happen before. I've had to tell people, no, I'm waiting on someone else, and then someone else never gets back to me. And then there are no shows, or in some, that's kind of the point. This thing works that way. I have to get a confirmation on that. I've had people show up in the studio 6 weeks earlier. They'd approached me and said, can I be on the show on, such and such date? And I'll say, well, yeah, let me know. This would be good. And then I don't hear anything from them. And then they show up here. Well, you said come in. Well, I was waiting for your confirmation. What if, because March 8th, we've got a primary here in this state for Republicans. My guess is we're going to be hearing from some of them on the program. They're not necessarily going to be in Twin Falls and swinging through the studios, but they'll likely be looking for time slots on the air. And what am I supposed to do? Tell them while I'm waiting on someone else? Or if I schedule them and then the other guy just shows up, we've got a conflict. So I wanted to share that with people this morning. And sometimes I think politicians feel that they're entitled. There's a sense that they get, after a while in office, everyone is. I had a politician one time. He claimed I swore at him when I left him a telephone message. He called my boss and told my boss that. And my boss said, let me hear the message. And then he played the message back. And the only thing I said to the politician was, gee, I'm very disappointed in you because you voted this way on this particular measure. Can you come on the show and explain your rationale? And my boss said, where's the swearing? And so then I told one of his colleagues, and he said, yep, a lot of guys here get that sense of entitlement and belief that, you're supposed to be kissing their rings. And it's not what I do. 811, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. That's not to say that there are people in office. There are a handful, maybe not many, but there are a handful of people I really personally like. And I would go out of my way to help them out. I've got a couple of folks here in the state legislature I feel that way about. They've been very good to me when I've called them up and said, can you come on the program and talk about these issues? Maxine Bell comes to mind. I know that there are some Republicans who aren't always happy with her, but I'll tell you what, she's been very good to me. And we have a number of others I feel the same way about. And Raul Labrador on the federal level, when he's on the program, feel the same way. And I feel that he's a look. If I wanted someone I agreed with 100% of the time, I'd run for office myself. I have no interest in doing that. So I've got to take the people I agree with generally more than 75% of the time. 12 minutes after 8 o'clock. One of those people that I really don't always agree with is Donald Trump. Although sometimes I agree with Donald Trump on some issues, immigration might be one of them. Donald Trump has found himself, according to media, getting chastised by Pope Francis. Trump, of course, is a Presbyterian, so Pope Francis doesn't really even wield any authority when it comes to religious faith with Trump. The Pope was on an airplane. He was traveling back home after a visit to Cuba and Mexico. And reporters asked him what he thought about Donald Trump's plans to build a wall and to send millions of immigrants back, illegal immigrants back to Mexico. Now, Trump has said he put a door in there so they could reapply for legal entry. He's been somewhat, I think, clear about that. Media, though, asked the Pope a question. The Pope answered the question, and he said, look, instead of building walls, we should be building bridges. He doesn't mean that literally, but he's talking about, reaching out to other people and trying to be helpful, etc. And then he said, I would think that someone who made a comment like that really isn't being a Christian. And he went on, though, to say this at the very end of the statement. He said, if that is indeed what the man said. He's turning around to the reporter and he's saying, if indeed that is what the man said. In other words, being that you're in the media, you have a tendency to twist things. And I was telling Benito Baeza this morning, we were having a conversation about this very story, and I was having a thought train, and I said, you know what? The Pope, when he issued an encyclical a couple of years ago, this is a man who has said he's not going to stay in the job probably beyond this year. Speaking of term limiting yourself. So popes, like politicians, are transitory figures, and they move on. So you don't always have to like everything that they speak about. But here's the thing. He was writing in an encyclical, and he was commenting about media. And he said in this encyclical, and I shared this with a lot of friends at the time, he said, media tends to do its job through its own prism, and report through its own prism. In other words, he was very politely saying, they're a bunch of biased goof-offs. And he's aware of that. And he's aware that no matter what he says, it is going to get reported through that, especially in the Western world, that liberal media bias. As when he supposedly said, who am I to judge, when he was talking about same-sex relationships. Well, there was a lot more to that statement. Media chose not to report it because then he got into some church doctrine and the like, and he's got a pretty good knowledge of the Bible because of his role. And he was not saying, go ahead, go to it, have at it, have fun. It's not exactly what he said at all. So he made his comments on the plane. He's asked a question. He responds. Listen to this. This is from Mike Huckabee, who, of course, is a Baptist preacher, or he says he's no longer, but I think once you're a Baptist preacher, you're pretty much always a Baptist preacher. Mike Huckabee speaking. I found this at the Fox News feed this morning. And listen to his comments.
In this case, what makes it so remarkable, number one, is that all of the GOP candidates have called for a secure border, every last one of them. And so why did the Pope just single out Donald Trump? Secondly, 3 of the candidates are Catholic. And I think it's going to be interesting to find out, will they say, I disagree with my Pope on this one?
Well, actually, Mike, he didn't single out Donald Trump. He was asked a question by a reporter about Donald Trump. So he gave a response. And once more, at the end of his response, he said, if indeed that is exactly what he said. In other words, you reporters tend to twist things. Not only that I say, but what Donald Trump says is what the Pope is saying in that matter. Number 2, when he said 3 of the remaining candidates, actually only 2 of the remaining candidates are Roman Catholic. That would be Rubio and Bush. Bush may well be out after this weekend in South Carolina because story out today says he can no longer afford to pay his staff. Now, John Kasich was born and raised as a child as a Roman Catholic, left church altogether for a while, and when he finally ended up drifting back into Christianity, he joined an Anglican communion or community that is very much Catholic in its worship. You have a lot of Anglican Catholics out there, and that's what he ended up going that direction. So, born a Catholic, but not a Catholic now, and Ted Cruz, born a Catholic, but not a Catholic now. He's a Southern Baptist, following in the footsteps of his father, who ended up converting. So there you have it. Bobby Jindal was a Roman Catholic. He's no longer in the race. So we've had a number of Chris Christie, George Pataki. They've all dropped out now at this point. 817, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And Mr. Trump even said this late last night in an interview. And in the beginning, he seemed a little bit ticked off about it, but he said last night, he said, I've been reading what the Pope said, and it seems to me that those folks who are in media have been making a mountain out of a molehill. So even after Trump saw exactly what the Pope said, and the Pope gave him the benefit of the doubt too as well, Trump said, what's the big deal? And so people are making much of a mash out of this. Also, speaking of Donald Trump, the liberal reporter Joe Klein, who happens to have written some books about politics, fictional works. I think some people say he still writes fiction as an editor at the what's called Time magazine, was being asked a question yesterday morning on Morning Joe on MSDNC by the host of that program, Joe Scarborough. And the two of them got into a bit of a snit. Klein running down Trump, claiming Trump is like an evil, speaking of Rome, former Roman emperor.
I'm making the point that they've been dead wrong about Trump for 6 to 9 months. And by the way, right now we're getting the slings and arrows, not because we support Donald Trump. As I said, anybody that knows me, my family, they know who I'm voting for. It's not Donald Trump. But at the same time, we have been skewered because we have simply said he's not an idiot that is going to lose this race.
He has a very, very highly developed lizard brain. He really
that's your answer. That is your answer. So we have moved from Bush derangement syndrome to Obama derangement syndrome. Is there a doctor in the house? We have the first recorded instance of Trump derangement syndrome.
He has a feral intelligence.
Oh my God!
He reminds me of the Emperor Caligula, who got his greatest pleasure from destroying his opponents and humiliating them.
Well, the opponents have the opportunity to destroy and humiliate Donald Trump. They just haven't been doing it. And to make a comparison to Caligula, that's a really, really big throw. You've got a guy like Bill Clinton, who's apparently, according to many witnesses now, and women coming forward, a serial rapist. That is, he just takes what he wants, and he doesn't care about the law and thinks he's above the law. Donald Trump has none of that in his background, and yet he's the one who's compared to Caligula because this communist Joe Klein at his Communist Time magazine has an issue with the way the guy's been running his campaign. Me too, in some instances. I think he could start dialing it back because it looks like he may well be the next president. I wish he would start acting a bit more presidential, but I got to tell you, Scarborough is right on the mark on that one. Trump derangement syndrome. Look, I'll take your telephone calls following this break. I can't do it while I'm off air. I'll give you an opportunity to respond in just a moment. The number, 736-0300. That's 736-0300. I do know there are some people who'd like to get in on this, so we'll pick that up on the other side of the break. I'm not necessarily, I'm not defending everything the Pope has said while I'm sitting in this chair. I mean, I have, like a lot of people in his church, I have some concerns. He's not necessarily criticizing Nancy Pelosi or John Kerry or Joe Biden, who bring grave scandal to his church by their actions, but reporters aren't asking him about that. So he's just answering the questions, I suppose, that he's getting. I think that's one thing I'd like people to keep in mind. The Washington Post went after him today. The Post, very liberal, but said he should stay out of American politics because I think they know that if he starts getting his foot in the door, he will criticize a lot of those abortion-loving liberals who claim to be Roman Catholics, who are definitely leading a lot of people to hell who are following them. And that is a serious issue. It's 8:25. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. I'll get to the telephones in just a moment, but I do want to share with you that February is Heart Month. Here's a tip that you may not have thought of when it comes to your healthy heart. Dr. Christine Pickup of Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert reminds you to have your hearing checked. Include a hearing check as part of your routine physical. Studies show that a healthy cardiovascular system, including heart, arteries, and veins, have a positive effect on your hearing. You can call Dr. Christine Pickup today at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert at 312-0957 or log on to mountharrisonaudiology.com. We have a caller with us. You're up next. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. I just I want to ask a question and then probably another question. I hear a lot, and the Pope's has started this, saying by putting up a wall that's unchristian like, and I want to know where that's coming from. Even in the Bible itself, when they had fought wars that for their freedom, after it was all said and done, what did they do to their towns? They put up a wall.
He's got a wall.
Why did they put up a wall? They put up a wall to keep the people out that would harm them. And if they proved themselves worthy enough, they got in. It's just as simple as that. But I don't understand how putting up a wall to protect your own people, aka your family, United States American family, that's un-American. We can still take care of people outside or in their country, help them help themselves. That is Christian. To just hand out money for no reason or do things for no reason isn't Christian-like. Christian-like is picking somebody up and teaching them how to take care of themselves.
Great point, and I thank you for the call. Remember, there's a big, thick wall around the Vatican. In Israel, the prime minister is saying he's going to wall off his entire country for security reasons. There's a piece here today from Breitbart. A mom whose son was tortured to death by an illegal immigrant endorses Trump and says, Pope doesn't care about me. This is a woman who was speaking to, her name is Wilkerson, speaking to the publication Breitbart. And she said that, for instance, she said, I don't think I've ever heard the Pope say one thing about our families who have lost loved ones at the hands of illegal immigrants. I'm not sure he understands the loss we have felt. Is he just ignoring that? It rubbed me the wrong way. She also said she would never vote for Marco Rubio because of his actions when it comes to this issue, and she thinks he's a double talker. That's probably why he has that rubbery-looking face. It's very elastic, right? He can change positions and looks all the time that way. 827, you're up next. You're on KLIX.
Yeah, good morning. The main issue in this papal statement about the wall is not his necessarily getting involved in American politics. It's his own self-interest in wanting more Catholics to enter the country through Mexico, from Central America.
Do you really believe that? Have you heard him say that?
No, of course he hasn't said that, but it increases his power. Just as
what
when
power?
The
Catholics don't follow him anymore anyway.
Immigration of the early 20th century of Irish and Italians and others into the country increased Catholic political influence in this country.
What political influence? They don't bother to listen to him already. They haven't listened. No Catholics that I know of, other than a handful of us. I'm a conservative Catholic. I thank you for the call. There's a lot I've got in disagreement with this Pope. A lot of things I don't agree with him about. And the majority of Catholics, if you ask Catholic women, for instance, if they're using birth control, and he gave a bit of a dispensation on that yesterday during those remarks, 90% of them, the women will say, yes, we are using it. Well, the church says no. Come on, this notion that he's going to bring them here and that somehow they're all going to go out and they're going to scheme and we're going to have papists taking over the country and throwing out the Constitution and we'll have rule directly from Rome. I almost said bull something on the air when I heard that comment. All right, I'll say it, bull manure. That's a little clearer. When I hear that crap, that's been going around since what? Back in the 1840s when the Irish started to arrive and all the way up through John Kennedy's election as president? Ooh, it's a secret papal plan to take over the United States. Well, then what? Make you all go to Mass every day? Well, that actually might be good for you, I suppose, but... No, he hasn't said it, but I know in my heart that that's exactly what he wants. Well, what about the Baptist plans to take over the country? How about the Presbyterian plans to take over the country or the Mormon plans to take over the country? How come we never hear that? Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. This is a pope who can't keep control of his own church and the people in his own church. How's he going to take over 335 million Americans and make us subservient? Give me a break. When I hear those comments, I am my last name, which probably sounds it's been anglicized. It appears in many, many countries. My brother even told me one time it appears in Norway. Don't know how that happened, but it actually you'll find it in Brittany, which is part of France. You'll find it in England, which comes from a Cowley generally. You'll find it in Wales, where in Welsh Gaelic it means black, like as in four collie birds from the song. That's four blackbirds. You can see spellings of it that come out like the dog spelling in Scotland. But out of Ireland, where it actually in my family came from, I come down from a line going back to the 6th century to a chieftain by the name of Mac Colley, or either Kilcooley or Gilcooley. And that came out of that area around Roscommon, Galway, and County Clare. And on my mother's side of the family, even though her father was a Gordon, on her mother's side, they actually, the name was Green, but it was actually, that was anglicized to Green from an old Irish word for a family that I can't even pronounce, I think, at this point. So when I went in the Colley ancestry, they came over to dig the Erie Canal. They did not come here, by the way, to institute the papacy and to take over the United States. 8:35, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com, 736-0300, 736-0300. I was reading this morning a piece by Dwight Longnecker, who was a graduate of Bob Jones University, of all places, yet he's a Roman Catholic priest. Over time, he ended up drifting away from his Protestant faith, and he became a Roman Catholic priest. He's got a wife. He's got kids. Got like eight kids, and his church takes care of all of them. But he was saying that he thinks that there's still a undercurrent of anti-Catholicism in this country, and I think we heard it in the last half hour. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on KLIX.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. I don't agree with Trump about building a wall. If he is what he says he is, and he built this wall to protect the American people, this government has declared anyone who calls on the name of Christ to be an extremist and a potential terrorist.
Yes.
Once Trump is out again and it turns back to Antichrist, then all these Christians in this country they'll use that wall to persecute God's people.
Interesting thought, and I thank you much for the telephone call, 736-0300, 736-0300. Look, Donald Trump, I don't know. A lot of things he says, I say, well, that's pretty cool. Ann Coulter wrote a column yesterday where she said there are 6 things about Trump that he really appeals, issues that he appeals to the American people about. But, yeah, walling the country, look, something has to be done. We can't have a sieve where people are pouring across. But on the other hand, if you wall the country, that may also allow you to keep people in. We've got to start asking ourselves some serious questions about how you better patrol that border. And maybe all you have to do is give some guys, Border Patrol agents, heavy weaponry, and they'll take care of that. And there's no need then for a wall. 8:37, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. His call, by the way, if we get a chance, a little later in the show, I want to share with you because he's on to something. And state of Virginia, some legislators in that state have gone, I think, down a path that will help protect Christians in this country. Unfortunately, that state is run by a governor named Terry McAuliffe, who is it's an opinion of mine. I think he's a scoundrel. I know him personally because I was married to a woman whose sister was married to his first cousin. And I have had some dealings with him over 20 years ago. I will tell you right now that I don't think he will get in the way of any plans to protect the Christians in his state against oppression. That is, being forced to bake cakes for people whom they don't necessarily agree with when it comes to marriage. We'll talk about that a little later in the program. I do want to remind you about our friends at Tint Lady. I've been telling you about them on this show for about a year now. And Tint Lady of Idaho, this is a great little company. It's locally owned and operated. They've been in business for a quarter century here in Twin Falls. They will do a free estimate. If you call, and the number is 736-8469, 736-8469, or go to the website, tintladyidaho.com, set up an appointment. And they'll come out, look at your home, your office, or even your automobile and give you an estimate of what it will cost to tint those things. You do that because it helps protect your valuables inside from some of the harsh rays of the sun, but it also reduces some of that heat in the summer that comes from the sun and helps you obviously pay those air conditioning bills by reducing them somewhat. Tint Lady has moved to a new location, 127 Filer Avenue on the corner of Washington and Filer. So more visible. You could probably drop in and say hello and tell them we sent you as well. And remember, don't squint, get tint. 840, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We've got more on the way in just a few minutes. I want to share with you on a lighter subject. A lot of you people will be going to the Home and Garden Show. I'll be there actually on a couple of occasions myself over the next few days. I'll be there this afternoon, and I'll be there Sunday afternoon following church. I'm meeting with all the papists Sunday morning, and we're going to have some discussion about how we'll eventually conquer the world and force everyone to go to Mass. But we're starting right here in Twin Falls Sunday morning. Well, Saturday night too, I think, as well. But we're starting right here in Twin Falls, and then it's just going to spread out, and then you'll all be made to bend to our will, including Donald Trump. But I will be at the Home and Garden Show this afternoon and on Sunday. If you'd like to come along and sock me in the face, there's your opportunity.